Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast, where I am back from lovely Chicago. Not so lovely the drive to O'Hare, just a complete nightmare. Chicago, get on it. It shouldn't take me 90 minutes to get to go O'Hare, no matter what time of day it is. The lottery happened. I was in the room. Victor Wembanyama will be going to the San Antonio Spurs. And let me tell you, Jonathan Givony, I have been in that lottery room so many times that they asked me, dude, you're here again? Aren't you tired of this? I am the Elgin Baylor of the drawing room, and I have never been in a room as tense and nervous and frantic as that one. Not the Zion lottery, not the AD lottery. I was there for both of them. This was something altogether different. Everybody understood the possibility of getting this guy and what it means. What was your initial reaction to the Spurs getting him? And I read your piece today where you talked about how, in your opinion, and from what you've heard about people around the league, at least the people who are not bitter that they didn't get him because they had a chance, that this is a great fit for him. What have you heard about that? What was your reaction?
I was happy for him because, I've spent a lot of time with him now the past few years, and with his family and his camp, a lot of calls, setting up all the, different Victor appearances that we've had, that we have still more coming here that we're going to see here on ESPN. And I was just excited for him because, these guys have no choice whatsoever about where to go. And it's such an important thing for them to end up in the right spot. And I think it's really important for the NBA and for the basketball industry and for global basketball. And so I know that he was really excited to end up in San Antonio. You could see his reaction. You could see the family's reaction. Privately, they were all saying the same thing, that that's really where he wanted to be. And I think it's just great for the Spurs, just been toiling in mediocrity for years now. And they were looking for that, that face of the franchise, and they got it now. They have this brand new facility that they're opening, the Sports Science Center, and there's no better guy to cut that ribbon than Victor. And for Pop, like one of the great figures in basketball here of our generation, and just to see him, kind of get rejuvenated for a couple more years, hopefully, and usher in this talent and go out on a strong note. I think it's great for basketball. So I was happy for him. And I think, you were in the room, we were on set, the watching it, kind of be unveiled, and all the team officials and agents and all the players are in attendance, everybody except for Victor. And there was an incredible amount of tension in that room too. And just like the gasp that you heard, when Detroit fell from 1 to 5, and then just, the lottery is an incredible event, just like seeing kind of the face of a franchise, people's careers, being turned on, with something that they have just zero control on. It's remarkable year after year.
I love it. It's my favorite thing. It's just beyond ridiculous, and in the best possible way. And this is not to demean the Spurs at all. The Spurs record speaks for itself. They drafted Tony Parker, 29 or whatever it was. They drafted Manu Ginobili in the late 50s. They swung an all-time trade for Kawhi Leonard at 15. The record, and it goes beyond that. But it is a reminder that for as genius as you are, as good as you are at your job, and finding Manu playing in Italy and getting on him at age 18 and all this, it's Tim Duncan and it's Victor Wembanyama, and it's the luck of the lottery, and none of it is possible without that. And like you said, the Spurs, ever since the Leonard situation went sideways, this is a team that's just been in total purgatory, and they made a decision over the last 18 months. We don't want to be in purgatory. We want to bottom out. We want to bottom out with this draft is our target. And they had an 86% chance of not getting the guy that everybody was targeting, and a 14% chance of getting him, and they got him. And now they have a nice core of Wembanyama. Devin Vassell, I think, is going to be a great complementary player. He's got to work on his playmaking a little bit, but I like him. Keldon Johnson's contract is going to be a ridiculous value contract. It declines to $17.5 million in 2027. I love Sohan. as a jack of all trades. They still have to get some guards and figure all that out. And by the way, everyone's like, are they going to make the playoffs next year? How fast are they going to hit the accelerator? I don't know what you've heard. My guess is that they are not going to rush this at all. They're going to take a year, see what they have, see how they think it's best to keep Victor healthy, see how many games he can play. Yeah, maybe they'll add a veteran point guard here. I mean, it's slim pickings in free agency. They have all these picks in the bank from Atlanta and other places. Like, I don't get the sense yet that at least for the next calendar year, they're going to go like whole hog. We got to start winning big time right away. Maybe in a year, if he proves really good, like all-star level good immediately, that changes it. But that's my best read on it. What is yours?
I agree with you. I don't see them cutting corners here and making a short-sighted move just to try and get the A seed next year. I mean, like you said, they've got a very strong core here with Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Branham, and Jeremy Sohan, who to me is the perfect complement for Victor Wembanyama. That's exactly the kind of guy you want next to him. And but I don't see them tanking next year also. I think that they're going to kind of let the cards fall as they do, and they're going to try and compete. And they're, if they make the play-in game, great. I mean, a lot of it is going to come down to how many games Victor is going to play, not because he's going to get hurt, but because I think they're going to bring him along slowly. And I think they're going to.
I totally agree. I don't know where to even begin setting the over-under on games played for Victor next year. Like, I wouldn't set it that high. They're not going to tank. You're right. And
that's going to be a fight, though, because Victor is going to want to play every game. And so there's going to be some push and pull there where they're going to have to explain to him long term what they're trying to do, because this is a guy that did not miss a single game this year. And so you're going to have to explain to him, hey, Victor, you're healthy, but we're scratching you tonight. You're going to be in sweats on the bench. And he's going to be like, what are you talking about? That's not the way I'm wired. So we'll see how that goes.
I wanted to ask you about that because you and Brian have spent a lot of time, and especially you, around Victor and his team in France. And you published a wonderful story with Brian this week about the making of Victor Wembanyama and his work ethic, and him watching Pistol Pete videos, and him remaking his hand position on his jump shot independently. People should go read that story if they can. There was one quote in there that I wanted to make sure to ask you about, and I can't remember which member of his team said it. I don't have it in front of me. I think it was one of his agents. Said, Victor will not be put in a box. You're going to have, and the second half of the quote is something like, you're going to have to work around what he can do. I wanted you to add a little more context to that, how that played out in his career in Europe, because he changed teams several times, as you outlined, with an eye on his development, with an eye on making sure he found a team that was going to be tailored to his development. And B, is it possible to translate that mindset to San Antonio? Like how does that translate to the NBA, that won't be put in a box thing?
I think it's possible to translate it because they need a face for the franchise. They need a guy that the organization revolves around, and he's the star. And I think that's what he was looking for, and that's what excites him so much, is that this is Victor Wembanyama's team right now, and they're going to build around him. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be doing all these stupid things, like they're going to steer him, because Victor is a guy that you can coach at the same time. And he picked Vincent Collet not because he wanted to go to some circus show where he's going to shoot the ball 30 times.
To be clear, for people who don't know, that is the longtime coach of the French national team, who is his most recent club coach in France.
Yeah, Vincent is a tough coach. He didn't go somewhere where they're just going to roll out the ball and let him do whatever he wants. And so I think it's going to be a similar thing with Pop at the same time. Pop is going to coach him. They're going to go at each other. But Pop has the gravitas to tell Victor, no, like I coached Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. This is how it's going to be. But at the same time, the Spurs need Victor to be great. So they're going to do what it takes to put him in a position to be successful. And when they say Victor will not be put in a box, that means he's not going to be this guy that, is a traditional center that you just post up. 30 times a game. He wants to have that freedom to be on the perimeter, to create his own shot, to play pick and roll, to take a defensive rebound and push the ball 94 feet and, throw a skip pass to the corner. And so that's what he means. And that's what he hasn't always had throughout his career. And he's told me, he said, when I have been put in that box, things don't go well. And that's when you'll maybe see him mope around a little bit and, not give 100% on defense. And so those are the things that the Spurs are going to need to work through. He's gotten so much better in that regard with his competitiveness and his willingness to do the little things, to defend and box out and rebound and be that, that guy that plays both ends of the floors. I mean, honestly, the best thing that he brings right now is his defense. He's learned how to impact the game on that end of the floor. And so that's what they're going to work through, is surrounding him with the right pieces to make sure he gets the most out of himself.
You and I were both in Chicago for a lot of the week. Obviously, everybody, the whole NBA is there, minus Bob Myers, whose contract negotiations are ongoing. We'll see how I think he was planning to go there later this week. You might be there today for all I know. It's a big deal, by the way, Bob Myers' contract negotiations. And The Athletic reported late last night that they are far apart and the Warriors and the rest of the league are bracing, was the quote, for Bob Myers to leave the Warriors. I heard that same kind of pessimism being whispered around the combine. We'll see. It's gonna impact their negotiations, but that's neither here nor there. Let me tell you, and I'm sure you've heard this too, the level of exuberance about what this guy is going to be in the NBA and how much hype is too much hype. So here's what's too much hype. Chris Broussard, who I've worked with and like a lot, said yesterday that if he is not better than Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant, or if he's Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, another player, that will be a disappointment. There's no sentence in the world where being Kevin Durant is a disappointment. Kevin Durant is, like, at worst the 15th greatest player in the history of the NBA. So that's too much hype. Here's the conversation I had with a lot of people. It's not how good this guy is going to be. It's how fast he's going to get good. Is it going to be like a slightly slower burn? Like it's going to take 2 or 3 years for him to become an all-star? Or is he just going to walk into the league and become a top 20 player immediately? There are people who think that that's in play. There are other people who are like, he's not, like Tim Duncan was 22, right? Wembanyama is 18, not going to be 19, whatever he's going to be. He's got to fill out a little bit. Let's pump the brakes on that. But there are people who think he's going to be immediately a great player. And if not immediately, it's just a matter of time. Like that's the level of, like, what people are saying on TV about his potential is not hyperbole. You will not find anyone. I can't find anyone in the NBA who's like, maybe he'll just be like decent. That's like, doesn't exist, does it? I haven't heard that.
I haven't heard that from anyone credible. I am in the camp that thinks he will compete for an all-star nod his rookie year. Maybe it's an injury replacement or whatever, but I mean, it's gonna come down to how many games he plays, which we're gonna see. But I think just the impact that he's going to make defensively is going to be immediate. Just with
that's what stands out. I mean, you've watched him way more than I have.
7'5", 8-foot wingspan, the feel for the game, the anticipation skills, the mobility, the fluidity to cover ground on the perimeter. He can switch, he can drop, he can play in a zone and protect the rim.
He is the zone.
Exactly. I mean, like, just good luck scoring on that guy. He just puts his arms in the air, and he's going to be an impactful guy. And then on the floor, and then you talk about what he does offensively. Okay, he's probably not going to be a great shooter from day one, partially because of shot selection. He's shooting in the low 30s or the high 20s or whatever on the season. I mean, he's a great shooter who is figuring out which shots to take right now. But I think the NBA game is going to suit him much better than the European game. Just, we saw it in the Ignite games, 36 points, 37 points. I think he's going to be a 20-point per game guy from day one. So I do think he's going to compete for an all-star nod, and I think it's going to be really, really fun to watch.
The shot blocks that catch everyone's eyes are the ones where he like rotates from the rim to the corner and blocks a three. Those are awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, those are ridiculous. The ones that make me go like, "Oh my God," is when he's guarding someone at the elbow and he's guarding them. He's at the elbow, so he's at the foul line. And someone drives baseline and seems like they have a layup, and he makes that rotation so fast and he's so long that like the ball doesn't even leave the poor guy's hand. Like it's not even up on the way. It's not even on the way up. It just is in Victor's hand. And those are the blocks that are going to be more available to him more often than those like spectacular corner closeout. That's like an every possession kind of rotation that's there. It's remarkable what he can do. Let me tell you can I tell you what the room was like for those who don't have
Sure.
ESPN Insider? So there are 14 ping pong balls in the machine, 1 to 14. There are 1,000 combinations of 4 numbers, and each team owns a certain number of those combinations based on how bad they were the previous season. So the worst teams have 140 each, I think. And they have all the low numbers. So like 1 and 2 and 3 is Detroit, San Antonio, Charlotte. If your 4 number combination has those numbers in it, if the one that comes up has those low numbers in it, it's gonna be one of those 2 teams. Ball 1, 14. Everyone's in right away. 14 is the highest possible number. In the back row, Teresa Resch from the Raptors, who had the second worst odds, elbowed Bryson Graham from the Pelicans, who had the worst odds. It was like, yo, we're in. We're in. Now it's not loud. It's not like I heard that. They told me afterwards, we're in. Second ball, 5. Okay. Most teams still in. No low numbers yet. Third ball, 8. There's 10 seconds between balls. Let me tell you right now, the 10 seconds between 14 and 5, 5 and 8, and 8 and the last ball were borderline excruciating because almost the whole room is in at 14, 5, and 8. And everyone has this 8-page document. Every team representative has this 8-page document that has all the combinations and who owns them. Everyone is like flipping through, rifling through papers, like people are shaking. And you know who had it? The best, maybe not the best chance, but okay, so 14, 5, 8. Every single Washington Wizards combination started with 5. They had no numbers lower than 5. There were 11 balls left in the hopper. 6 of those 11 balls deliver Victor Wembanyama to the Wizards. 6 of them, most of the high ones. Brett Greenberg, who's the assistant GM of the Wizards, realized it right away. And if you watch the video, he leans over on his sheet and he's like, and he's leaning, like hunching over on the sheet, gripping it. And then the last ball comes up and it's 2. And everyone's like, 2. Okay, that's going to be one of the worst teams. So most of us just got eliminated. Brian Wright, the Spurs GM, is sitting there like he's trying to figure out who wins it. And the Rockets guy elbows Brian Wright and's like, man, that's you. That's you. And that's it. For like 30 seconds, the whole world was in play for Wembanyama. And then it went to the Spurs. Did you read the thing about R.C. Buford's chair?
I did.
So let me tell people about it. So they let us out of the room. We're locked in the room. We're not locked in the room. Like if someone had a bathroom emergency, they might let us out. But we have no phones, no laptops, no anything. They let us out as soon as the show's over. Everyone scampers up to the ballroom looking for the right people to get a quote. And I see R.C. Buford by himself. I was like, I gotta go say hi to R.C. And I ask him the stupidest question possible, with the only question, just like, did you flash back to the Tim Duncan lottery in 1997? And I'm expecting some pithy Spursian, like, we're really fortunate. We're just gonna have to develop another great player. And RC looks at me and starts laughing. He's like, you're goddamn right, I did. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, let me tell you this story. I was sitting in my office when we won the 1997 lottery, and I was sitting in a blue leather chair. It's my lucky chair. From that moment on, it was my lucky chair. When my daughter went to college X years ago, I gave it to her. She took it to college. It's gone. The blue leather chair belongs to her. 3 p.m. Central Time-ish, R.C. Buford arrives at his hotel room in Chicago, opens the door. The chair is in the room with a card on it because it was his birthday and it was a birthday card. And he's like, that's the chair. At that moment, the lottery gods were like, you know what? You've gone the extra mile. He's going to the Spurs. I just can't believe that chair needs to be, it needs its own private room at whatever the arena is called now in San Antonio or in the practice facility. Then we had some pasta salad and some sandwiches and watched the television show. And some people were sad and some people were happy. And Brian Wright was especially happy. There was disappointment that he didn't react. He was criticized in the room for being too professional. People wanted a lack of professionalism, and he was very professional, and everybody was universally disappointed.
We got a great reaction on the set. Let's go. I mean, I've never seen that before. That was amazing.
That was good. And Peter Holt, the Spurs governor, I snuck a peek at the envelope and just got a head start on the celebration. You saw the number 2 envelope. It was like teal. Like, okay,
yeah.
Here we go.
Side, yeah.
Well, it was teal because the number 2 pick is the Charlotte Hornets and the number 3 pick is the Portland Trailblazers. And as I wrote that night, as soon as Portland came up 3, the whole league began speculating about are they going to trade this pick and package it with something to get Damian Lillard veteran help? Because the expectation is, as of now, unless Dame, this is the 4th straight year of saying this, changes his mind and really forcefully asks out, which there's no indication that that's happening, they're going to try to win. They're going to try to win around him. They're going to re-sign Jeremy Grant, and this pick will be in play. And Joe Cronin, pretty much acknowledged, yeah, I'm going to listen to offers for this pick. But Charlotte at 2, that's where the draft gets interesting. You released your mock draft right after the lottery, and you have Brandon Miller going to Charlotte over Scoot Henderson. And now there's this big debate over, can Scoot and LaMelo work? If not, should they just take Brandon Miller? Should they try to flip-flop picks and get an extra asset if they want Brandon Miller? What is your latest read on Charlotte's intentions?
The best part about being here in Chicago is that the access that you have to every single person in the NBA. And honestly, it's a near consensus in the gym that Charlotte is going to take Brandon Miller. I'm not ready to go that far because knowing Mitch Kupchak, the workout is going to be very, very important there. So Scoot Henderson has an opportunity to go in there and blow the doors off in his workout. And I think he has that type of talent. I've watched him work out individually. I've seen him practice. He's an exceptional talent. Just the level of just the body right away when he walks in the gym, you're like, holy cow, this guy is huge. Long arms, incredibly explosive, and has very, very dynamic shot making ability in a workout setting, which, he's not a great shooter at this stage, but I think that's going to alleviate some of the concerns around, do you have enough shooting with LaMelo and Scoot Henderson? And I think LaMelo is the type of guy that can coexist with almost any player. I mean, he's a Halliburton type passer, cutter, off-ball mover. He loves, hitting ahead in transition. He's not a ball dominant guy. He's also not this incredibly explosive athlete that you want creating his own shot every single possession of a game. So I don't subscribe to this theory that Scoot and LaMelo can't coexist at the same time. But I just think that you look at their wing depth at the same time, and you look at the season that Brandon Miller had. SEC Player of the Year, first team All-American. Mitch Kupchak was front and center for his best game of the season. He dropped 41 points at South Carolina. He was very, very excited after that game, I was told. And Scoot Henderson he did not have the kind of season where you're like, okay, he locked up the number 2 pick. It's a done deal. He only played half the games. He looked like he was in cruise control half the time. He didn't make a lot of progress with his defense, with his shooting, with his decision-making. He really opened up the door for a guy like Brandon Miller, who's every team in the NBA is looking for this type of player. 6'9", big guard, can handle the ball, pass out of pick and roll, make shots off the dribble, defend multiple positions, rebound. I mean, that's what people are looking for. At the same time, he is not in great shape right now, so I don't know how great his workout's going to be. His interviews have not been great, I've been told, both publicly and privately with NBA teams. And so the door, I think I would put it 60% Brandon Miller at 2, 40% Scoot Henderson. I think and I do think they're going to have trade conversations too. I'd be shocked if they traded. They'd be out of their minds, honestly. Like, the best thing in the world that could have happened for them is getting the number 2 pick. But then there's also this kind of cloud hovering over them. You know, who's going to own this team in 3 months, 6 months from now? You know, does MJ decide to, hold on now? I mean, for them to move up from 4 to 2 is huge. I would assume the value of the franchise went up a little bit, not as much as had they gotten number 1. So a lot of question marks here. And, you talked about Portland. I don't see them trading it either, honestly.
Interesting.
I think they'd be very happy with Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson. I also think they're going to kick the tires on the Thompson twins, on Cam Whitmore. I think this is going to be a process here where they're looking at a lot of different options. So, and I
wonder. So you would predict they keep the pick
if the draft were tonight? Yeah, I think they would keep the pick. Yeah.
That's interesting because, look,
what trade are you going to make that makes them like a finals contender right away? I don't think that, Joe Cronin just signed this extension, like he's there long term. Mike Schmitz is there long term. They want to build they are committed to Dame 100%, but at the same time, they have this incredible window. Shaedon Sharpe he looks like he's going to be an all-star, Zach, but it's not going to happen next year. Yeah. So this is like the best that could have happened to them, moving up to 3, getting a guy that in 2 or 3 years from now, as the Dame window closes, is ready to make that leap to being an all-NBA player, because it's not going to happen for Scoot Henderson from day one also. I mean, so guards especially, it takes them a while to get good. It takes them a while to impact winning. And so I mean, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see what kind of trade offers are out there for them, but I don't see them trading the pick.
It's interesting. We're in Chicago when the Morant stuff happens, right? And that reminds everyone of the 2019 draft and how Zion just never plays. And 6-8 months ago, Memphis and New Orleans were like the 2 great rising powers in the Western Conference. And there's a sense now that maybe the West will be kind of quote unquote open in the next couple of years. And so you asked me what trade makes them a finals contender. And on the one hand, well, hey, the West is open. If we could package number 3 in Anthony Simons, could we get Mikal Bridges? I don't think that gets you there. Could we get OG Anunoby? I'm not sure that gets you there. Does that make you a finals contender? In the West, maybe. On the other hand, maybe the West is so wide open, you try to thread the needle like you just described and collect all these young guys. Maybe 1 or 2 of them pop at the same time. Maybe Nurkic gets healthy and has a great season, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, we're pretty darn good. But if I'm Damian Lillard and I'm 32 and I'm looking around, I got Simons and Sharpe and Brandon Miller, Scoot Henderson, and like all these guys are exciting. Are they that exciting to me? I don't know. Maybe they are. And I also think like the degree to which the West is quote unquote wide open, like Denver ain't going anywhere. Phoenix isn't going anywhere. I know everyone's disappointed in them. As long as they have those 2 dudes, they're not going anywhere. Clippers and Lakers, they'll go for it. Warriors, we'll see what happens. Like, it's a really interesting choice to me what Portland does there. And at the same time, Houston at 4, you have Amen Thompson going there, right?
Yes. Everyone
is very excited about him. The Houston stuff, first of all, I think Ime Udoka will do a very good job there, just getting that house in order. Second of all, I just don't really get any of the noise coming out of Houston. I don't really get the infatuation with bringing a declining James Harden back on a potential 4-year max deal. I don't get any rumors at all. This has been reported elsewhere, not by us. I have not heard this independently, but that like they'd listen on Jalen Green. No, I don't. That might mean, again, I haven't heard that. that might mean they listen if you like. It's just ludicrous, but I would not. I don't get any of that. Can you enlighten me on Houston? Because if I'm them, I'm like, what? Just I know they owe their pick next year, but I'm not rushing this just for the sake of rushing it.
I haven't heard that stuff, but honestly, if you look at it from the outside and you're in that front office, you're wondering if we have just an okay year, if we lose in the first round of the play-in game or whatever, we get swept in the first round of the playoff.
That would be amazing for Houston next year.
I mean, you hear rumors about, are they looking around at adding something to the front office? Do they, do you have a job in a year from now? And that's when front offices tend to make mistakes, is when they don't feel long-term security coming from the ownership, and they decide, I need to make a win now move right now. And then you start to look at their pieces and all that. They don't have their draft pick next year if it's top 4 protected. And so that's where I could see them trying to get as good as possible right away. You keep hearing that Harden to them, is likely, if not a done deal. And so
I will say the Doc firing, the whispers going around Chicago when that happened was, I wonder if that complicates Harden's path to Houston a little bit. If that makes it more likely that Harden will come back to Philly. I don't know. I don't know James Harden. I don't know James Harden's people like that. So who knows? I think both possibilities are probably still in play. And to me, like, what would have happened if Houston won the lottery? This is what I was polling people the day of the lottery. If you're the Rockets and you win the lottery, does that make you more, if you're the GM, does that make you more or less likely to go after Harden? What would you have answered that question?
More likely.
Really? I would have gone less. I would have gone like, we got Wembanyama. Let's wash our hands of this 32-year-old guy. I know he's a franchise legend. Let's just pivot totally the other way. You think let's try to like actually make a huge jump right away?
I think Victor is ready to help you win games. I mean, I think that's how you make a jump defensively, is bringing a guy in with an 8-foot wingspan who blocks everything. So yeah, I mean, and again, he's not looking to lose, so you want to get that train going and not, keep this vicious cycle of losing and more lottery picks and lottery picks. That's not how you get on the right foot with him.
Can I ask you about 2 other teams that I'm curious about?
Sure.
Team number 1, the Orlando Magic, who were over 500 for about the last 55 games of the season, kind of backslid a little bit their last 3 games, but I think proved themselves a legit decent team. And they've been over patient trying to win games. Like at some point they're going to have to just do something to try to win games. They have the number 6 pick. That's their pick. They have the number 11 pick courtesy of the Bulls, the end game of just an all-time disaster trade for Chicago. What is the early buzz on? I mean, to me, they have cap room. They have those 2 picks. They have a window. I think now is the time to hit the gas around Wagner and Banchero and some of the other pieces they have there. I mean, they could package those picks and move up. They could package those picks for a veteran. They could just keep the picks. I mean, everything's in play. I have no idea what they're going to do. What do you think?
Yeah, they have a lot of flexibility, and that was what people were questioning. They said, well, what is 6'11" and one of their young players, not, obviously Paulo or Franz Wagner, get you? How high does that get you? Or what kind of veteran does it get you? Who's available for them? And so, like, I think that they're ready to take the next step and try and start winning some games here. They're not going for the lottery again. Like next year's draft, it looks to be on paper pretty weak at this point. So, I mean, people have that incentive to try and be better next year. And I think they're going to be one of those teams that's going to try and make a push. What are they going to do specifically? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by another thing is everyone now knows what the new CBA is, that it's looming. And some of the teams with cap room or in the middle, or just some executives who kind of study this stuff and try to sort of game plan it out. The anticipation is that some of the expensive teams, not all of them, some of them, in anticipation of the crunch that's coming when all the new rules kick in, that there will be a couple a few gettable good players that those teams shed just to get off money. And if you have cap room and flexibility, you might be able to get them for cheap. So I think a team like Orlando, San Antonio, even, they can look to pick off a player like that for very low cost instead of going whole hog with these picks. I think there's a lot of optionality in play. The other team, everyone wants to know what Utah is going to do. Everyone, because Utah has up to just a bonanza of cap room, depending on a couple decisions. They have all the Minnesota picks, all the Cleveland picks, a Philly pick, another pick I'm forgetting. And in this draft, they have 9, that's their pick, 16, that's a Minnesota pick, and 28, I can't remember whose pick that is. 3 first-round picks in this draft. And everyone's wondering, are they going to try to speed this up more than they anticipated based on exceeding expectations last year? They have a great coach in Will Hardy, Kessler, Markkanen, the whole thing. I couldn't get a read. I was in the lottery room with Ryan Smith. I tried to get a read. I couldn't get a read. And I think the question they'll have to ask themselves is, I think they'd be happy to try to win more games next year and hit the accelerator a little bit, not floor it. But the question is going to be, well, who's the guy? Like, it's not like they're going to go trade for Bradley Beal or somebody that just doesn't fit their timeline. I think who's the guy is going to be tricky for them, but I'll bet they'll look around at some names.
Yeah, I think that they were surprised a little bit at how good they were. I don't think that necessarily was the plan there. So I just don't know. They're not going to be any worse next year. It's just when you play that hard, you're going to win games in the NBA, and they've got really good players, like with Larry Markkanen especially. So but they've also got some real holes in the backcourt that they need to fill. I think that they're going to build slowly. They're going to, they have these 3 first-round picks. I anticipate them using them, maybe taking some swings on talent, trying to hit a home run, because they have that, they have the stability there to not have to make a win now move right now. So yeah, I think they're in one of the best situations of any team in the NBA right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at their books, Clarkson player option 14-2 probably declines that. THT, who went bananas in the last month of the season, player option 11. That's interesting. Rudy Gay, player option 6.5. I'm going to go ahead and check that one off. And then a Linux deal is non-guaranteed for the most part. It's like 75% non-guaranteed. Like, they have a lot. They just got a lot of stuff, man. I don't know what they're going to do. And they're Utah, so it's not like if you're going to trade for someone, it's going to be someone who's under contract for a good number of years. Can we go back to the LaMelo Scoot thing?
Sure.
So we had Scoot on NBA Today in Chicago yesterday. It was just me and Malika and Scoot. And I asked him, it's the obvious question, but I said, you're either going to play with Dame or you're going to play with LaMelo, 2 guys who have the ball a lot. And he said he did what he's supposed to do, which is say, well, I can play with anybody. But you can tell when someone's just saying stuff, and you can tell when someone with bravado believes it. And he's like, I'm an awesome off-ball player. I don't know why people don't think, like, I can't play off the ball. My jumper's going to be fine. I can cut. I can move. I love playing defense. And, like, he was animated and he was into it. I know he's giving the answer he's supposed to give. I have no real issue with, like, a double back court like that. The one thing I would push back on is I thought LaMelo did veer into ball hog territory last year. I didn't like the way I felt like he got away from himself because he's an incredible passer, and he did average 8.5 assists. He took 21 shots per 36 minutes. And I think he was like one of 2 or 3 guys in the league who took that many shots per 36 minutes and less than 4 free throws per 36 minutes. He was kind of like chucking a little bit. And he only played 36 games, obviously, because of the ankle stuff. That's just interesting to me. And that was a lost season for the Hornets, just injuries up and down the roster, the Miles Bridges situation. It was a season to chuck. If you want to chuck away. I just am interested to see how he plays next year and how he would adapt to a Scoot Henderson. I'm like less interested in how Scoot would adapt to a LaMelo Ball than the other way around.
Zach, they're already friends. I mean, LaMelo is friends with everybody. I mean, there's not a single basketball player who doesn't like LaMelo Ball. They're already friends off the court. And I think LaMelo would be very excited to have a guy like Scoot, who some people wonder, like, does he maybe pivot towards maybe like the Donovan Mitchell route? Like not being, like this, natural point guard. But I think he's wired to score. And LaMelo to me is naturally unselfish. So I think that combination could work. I just don't know if that's the direction that they want to go in. I mean, I think they're probably tired of losing, and it's those two guys are not going to win you many games next year. And again, you start to talk about the stability of, like your position, the front office long term with ownership and all that. And that's where things get complicated, So like that's where people maybe make a short-term decision that's best for them, knowing, hey, we got to show some progress and we need to, maybe make a run to the AC like they've, that's their historical track record. So that's where, a lot of people think Brandon Miller is just a more natural fit for their roster. And that's why, you have to have some creativity to put it together a backcourt of Scoot Henderson and LaMelo Ball. And I just don't know if, people see that vision there in Charlotte.
Are there any other teams in the lottery that we didn't talk about that you think have interesting decisions to make, or that you had a hard time pegging for your first mock draft that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the situation in Washington is really interesting. Like how do they go about their pre-draft process, without having a lead decision maker in place? I mean, how do you conduct workouts? How do you, figure out, what you're going to do with Kristaps Porzingis and Kyle Kuzma? So like, I think they need to hit the accelerator here at some point and figure out, like which direction they're going in so they can, decide what do they want to do with that 8th pick, and what do they want to do with Brad Beal and with Kuzma and Porzingis? Like, do you try and be bad? Do you go through like an actual rebuild, which they probably has been overdue there for some time? So I think, that's one of the conversations. Like, who is Washington going to hire? First of all, like they've been keeping things pretty tight. Like you hear Trajan Langdon, you hear Michael Winger, you hear Elton Brand, but nobody has a real pulse on like what are they actually going to do. So that's going to be an interesting one for the basketball nerds.
Those three names, Trajan is the one I know least of those three. Those three names suggest to me that they are zeroing in on the right kind of people. Those are all people based on what I know and what I've heard, and now I've talked with them, that I would trust to run my team, that are going to be creative decision makers, courageous decision makers, guys who are going to be not particularly Elton will go against the grain if he thinks it's the right move. And I think you need that. Calvin Booth is like that too in Denver. And I think that has served the Nuggets well when he was the number 2 and now he's as the number 1. That's interesting. Really interesting week in Chicago. I only got to spend 3 or 4 days there, but the GM meetings were interesting. Did you see some of the stuff that came out? I had it in my column about the GM meetings. 2-day draft. Are you up for a 2-day draft? I think I wonder if that's like connected to a potential 3rd round. Do they want to make it a 2-day TV event?
I honestly think the 2nd round, it goes by way too fast. And I do think they're leaving something on the table there with like Jokic being drafted during a Taco Bell commercial. I mean, it just,
I forgot.
It's hard to keep track of all the picks being swapped and all that. I mean, to give it a little bit of breathing room, every kid, hears his name called, and then they can actually talk about him on the broadcast. Having the 5-minute window, I think would be a lot better. And so like, can you stretch that out to 2 days? I don't know what the format for that. Maybe like, I guess that means the first round be 10-minute picks, 15-minute picks. I mean, there's so much happening during the draft with the trades and all that, and Woj going nuts. And so I do think that there's a window there to make it something bigger, more similar to the NFL draft.
I'll just list them here. A couple other things that came out of the GM meetings. I was told the most lively topic of discussion was, have we become too much of a scoring league? how can we help defenses even the score a little bit? I don't know what concrete solutions there were for that. Flopping, big movement to like, we got to start penalizing flopping again. Love it. All about it. How can we make the last week or two of the season less awful? Which is an interesting conversation. There have been ideas about after a certain point, if you're in the lottery, like you get credit for winning rather than losing. I don't really know how that would work, and I think it'd be hard for fans to understand. And I think the seeding juggling really got on people's nerves this year with all the like every team looking 4 games ahead and being like, that team's going to lose on purpose, so we should lose on purpose in this game. Trying to find ways to make the higher seeds more valuable and also make the lower seeds less valuable, maybe in terms of like your ability to pick your opponent. The easiest one is just let every top seed 1 to 3 pick their opponent so that you can't control who you're going to play. That idea has never caught on. And if you want to propose something more aggressive, like I've heard, should you get, 5 home games if you're the number 1 seed? I don't think that's ever going to happen. Should you get more TV money if you're in the top 2 or 3 or 4 seeds than if you're I don't, those seem a little crazy to me, but I thought those were interesting. Really, I'm jealous you're still there.
Yeah, last day of scrimmages today, and then the pro day bonanza tomorrow. Go home for a couple of days and get on a plane, go to LA, and then 4 more days of pro days. And then the U16, the USA basketball training camp. I'm looking forward to that. Cam Boozer. So yeah, no, it's a fun time of year for sure.
Yeah, you don't get to linger too much on this draft. You're already 2024, 2025, 2026. That's why you are who you are. Jonathan Givony, go down to the lobby at the anonymous hotel and meet up with all the NBA people who are there. I was talking my mouth off the last 3 days there. Have fun. Thank you for your time. Enjoy Chicago.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, let's talk about the actual basketball that's going on, because it's conference finals time. 1 game a night. You just sink your teeth into it. You devour it. Nuggets Lakers resumes tonight, so we're not going to hit it at length here. I might do an episode tomorrow if tonight's game is interesting enough, because there's not a lot of point in talking about a game that's going to happen soon. But we'll see if Jokic can solve the riddle of Rui Hachimura. Spoiler alert, I think that he'll be okay doing that. But the Lakers, they just play their ass off, man. They play their ass off. I think this is going to be a really fun series. I think tonight is going to be a really fun game. Lots of adjustments and counters and all that stuff. But let's talk East. Miami, Boston, game 1 in Boston. I think ESPN's analytics, or I think Udonis Haslem called them assolytics or something like that, gave the Miami Heat a 97% chance of losing this series. And the Miami Heat just continuing one of the great borderline inexplicable runs in the history of the NBA postseason, storm into Boston with their 26th ranked regular season offense and hang 123 on the Celtics. Just a ho-hum 16 of 31 from deep. Took more threes in the Celtics, which is somewhat surprising. Jimmy Butler, sure, I'll give you 35, 7, 5, 6 steals. Sure. Caleb Martin, 15 more points. Kyle Lowry turning back the clock. This is just crazy. The Heat in the regular season, 112 points per 100 possessions, 25th in the NBA. The Heat in the playoffs, 116.6 points per 100 possessions, 4.5 points more. That's 3rd in the playoffs. And when you consider that the level of competition is all good teams, and I know they faced the Bucks, which is a great defense. The Knicks are just okay. That it's just incredible. And if you look at like, how are they doing this? Is their shot selection any different? No. Turnover rate's a little lower. Other than that, free throws, offensive rebounds, no. They're just shooting better. They're shooting better from 3. That's really all it is. They move the ball like all hell. They cut and they move and they screen until they get what they want. And Jimmy Butler is just being the best guy. Chris Herring, how are you?
Zach, I'm doing pretty well. And yourself?
Did you pick Celtics in 5, 6? I mean, what was your pick? There's just no I just have it's I just can't. My brain is still digesting that the Miami Heat are here. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I picked the Celtics in 7, but it's
Ooh.
really, but honestly, it's mostly out of respect for the Heat. It's, you think about it, and obviously there are questions about it now that I think are going to intensify about the Joe Mazzulla Eric Spoelstra matchup. A guy that is in this for the first time, and I'm sure we'll get to it in a lot of your podcasts today. There's that aspect of it. Yes, the Celtics have more talent on paper. So did the Bucks. Granted, the Bucks were without Giannis, but there's a factor here that just keeps the Heat in it. I think a lot of it gets down to their identity. They know exactly who they are. And, when we talk about a team that plays more zone defense than any other team statistically over at least the last 20 years or whatever it is, this is a team that knows who they are. This time of year, when we're talking about the playoffs, that goes a long way. I don't know that it makes you a favorite necessarily. But also, as we've seen now for at least one round, maybe two, maybe this would be a third, you can't really put a ceiling on a team that knows exactly what they are, who they are, when they have a closer like Butler and a guy that can just impact a game the way that Jimmy Butler can.
Jimmy is just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. The shot making, hunting Derek White, hunting Peyton Pritchard, whose appearance in the rotation is just bizarre to me. I don't understand how Peyton Pritchard jumped Grant Williams in the rotation. I continue to think that Grant Williams must be stealing people's lunches out of the refrigerator at the Celtics team facility, because this banishment makes no sense to me. Not that it's like a big deal. They're in the conference finals. Boston, I thought, gave him switches way too easily. But part of the reason that's happening is because teams used to go under on Jimmy Butler pick and rolls to avoid switching. And they're like terrified to do it now. They're terrified to give him any space. Yeah. And I thought Robert Williams on switches gave him too much space. And he was like, oh, I got like a cushion here. This is like a 13-foot jumper for me. Easy speasy. I thought Rob Williams had a bad game in game 1 defensively. And I just want to shout out Jimmy Butler. Here's just a partial list of players that he has been the primary defender on during the postseason. Giannis, Brook Lopez, when they needed someone to guard Brook Lopez because they wanted Bam on Giannis. Oh, maybe Jimmy can do that too. Jalen Brunson. Okay, then Jimmy, has the ankle issue. We got to take him off Jalen Brunson. RJ Barrett. All right, well, can you guard Mitch Robinson for us and Isaiah Hartenstein because we want Bam on Julius Randle, or we want and do that? Okay, sure. Do that. Jason Tatum. Okay. Jaylen Brown. Sure. Every position, every guy, he's ducking nobody, despite the fact that he is single-handedly carrying the Miami offense. Every guy, every position, every type of player. And again, last night, both Boston wings. You need him to guard Horford. Sure, I can do that. Like, the guy is having an all-time great playoffs. And other than that, give me your one big picture takeaway from game 1. Something that struck you, something you're going to be watching at in game 2. Just one issue you're really dying to talk about.
I mean, I think the big thing that I noticed is just Marcus Smart's playmaking in that first half. And when this Boston offense is rolling, working properly, spaced properly, has floor balance, what all they're able to get and who all is able to kind of really shine, Marcus Smart in particular, in a first half versus when those things aren't right. And I think that's kind of what you saw in so much of that third quarter. And a lot of the Celtics players said it last night, at least just reading the quotes and reading people's stories and stuff like that, that they weren't right. They weren't going right. You look at the fourth quarter, I know Tatum scored. He didn't take any shot attempts. And so it just kind of, it felt like they tried to, in the last 3 or 4 minutes, kind of force all the stuff that they weren't doing before. Tatum with his turnovers, looking indecisive, and credit obviously to Miami for their defense and exactly what I was saying before, knowing who they are, but Boston will look back at the film and realize there were a lot of things they could have been doing better. Certainly in the third quarter, they were making defensive mistakes and stuff like that. But really just, it was very much like that meme that became popular over the last year of the two people sitting on the bus, one person looking out smiling and the other just looking like they're filled with horror. And that was what the first half and the second half were for the Celtics. I think that they can do better here. Miami has to shoot themselves in the foot to really keep themselves out of it. Butler will always keep you in a game, will have you with an opportunity to win a game, a series. But Boston can't do certain things wrong and still expect to win these games. We saw this happen last year, by the way, too. I think exactly a year ago to the day, where they gave up, a big quarter where they were outscored by more than 20 to essentially start the series and found themselves losing. So I don't think it's unfixable, but I do think that Joe Mazzulla has to keep his head in the game. I don't think Peyton Pritchard can just play and get hunted with.
The thing about Peyton Pritchard is, this is the second time now he's in the rotation. The first time he played after being not in the rotation was like we're game 5 Philly. Let's find a spark. He's not involved on offense at all. Like there's no point in playing him if you're not going to try to use his shooting somehow as a screener and have him pop out or flare out. He's just a non-entity on offense who's getting picked at by Jimmy Butler, who's a nasty MFer bully. And again, they're just given that switch, and you can't give him that switch. He's going to eat Peyton Pritchard for lunch, and you're going to send help, and they're going to hit open threes because the Heat have apparently become like the freaking Warriors from 2019 in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, and literally, I want to say it was the first play Pritchard was out there. Butler ends up getting him. Butler scores. He got him later in the game too, where I think, the Celtics realizing, okay, Pritchard's not going to be able to guard him, send a second guy at him, and so Butler picks that apart. They score off that. Lowry got him later on a play, and he hits a shot over him. It's just kind of like you said. I kept wondering, was there more to that? And I even tweeted, I think, at one point last night, this is why I couldn't be a coach, because I wouldn't have had Pritchard appearing in the first quarter, let alone the fourth quarter, on my bingo card. Someone that has more or less been out of the rotation for the most part. You use him in spots. Mostly you're using him in garbage time when these games get to be blowouts. But when he was there early, I figured there was a purpose to it. Maybe there was, and they just got off schedule. But Grant Williams, to me, playing against a physical team, a guy that I thought did pretty well.
I don't get it. I don't. Joe Mazzulla just doesn't like him. Like Ime Udoka loved him. Like the Celtics have a great top 7. They want to play 8, and they keep just doing this 8th guy roulette between Sam Hauser and Grant Williams, and Blake Griffin appeared out of nowhere one game and never came back. If you're making me choose an 8th guy, I'm choosing Grant Williams. But that's not going to decide. Maybe it could be a factor, but it's not going to decide the series. Look, let me be clear. I still think Boston is going to win this series. They're just better than Miami. But the more Miami does this,
right,
the more you're like, okay, I guess
Miami's got to be tired of us, man, because like they're just like, yo, how many times do I have to teach you this lesson, old man? And it's they looked the part. Can I just say how impressed I was by Bam, Lowry looking like Toronto Lowry.
Yeah, I don't want any more Bam slander. I don't want to hear any more like, why doesn't this guy
so
average
aggressive
25
yesterday.
a game? He's got to back it down and do it. Bam is awesome. How many times do they have to get deep in the playoffs with Bam scoring 18, 20, 22? His shot making last night in the third quarter, their shot making as a whole at the beginning of the third quarter to close that gap from double digits down to 3 before he even blinked. Strus hit a huge like contested 3. Bam had 2 floaters and like drew a foul. Bam Adebayo, he's never going to please the guys. I don't know, never, but not in the near future. Is he going to please the people who are like, why isn't he giving 30 points to this guy and that guy? That's just not who he is. You know what he's going to do? Win a lot of goddamn basketball games because he's one of the best defensive players in the NBA. He's a playmaker. He pushes it up the floor. And there was also a stretch in the second half when they put Love on, when the Celtics go small, they with only one of the bigs, they put Love on the big guy, because he can't guard wings in space, and they put Bam on Jaylen Brown, and you get that cross match sometimes on the other end. And when they got it, he beat Tatum for an and one. He played his little bully ball. Bam is awesome. And Kyle Lowry, I have the stats in front of me because he looked like dead man walking in the regular season. Regular season, he shot 41%, 34% from three. That's up to 45%, 38% from three. And he's just got his pick and roll game going. He does the thing where he goes around the screen, snakes back the other way, takes two with him, and dumps it to the big guy. The craziest stat of the entire playoffs, Chris Herring. Are you ready for this? I looked it up on Second Spectrum because I saw that the Heat are like plus, I don't even know what. I think it's like plus 17 per 100 possessions with Cody Zeller on the floor. And I'm like, what? How? What does he do? He sets screens. That's what he does. The Kyle Lowry, Cody Zeller pick and roll. Who thought that was going to be a thing, by the way? They've run 37 pick and rolls in the playoffs. This is per Second Spectrum. 1.81 points per possession.
Wow.
And 1.46
Steph KD pick and roll type
directly
stat right
out
there.
of it. Like, what is going on?
Good Lord. You know what, though? Lowry, and I loved that he did the interview with inside the NBA guys last night after the game. I mean, he deserved it. He played a great game. All their role players basically did. I think Love might have been the only guy that didn't finish with 15. Like, everybody basically had, this was just a great game for the Heat. But he basically said, look, ever since I've been coming off the bench for this team, they need me to play differently. It's not a high-powered offense, obviously, and so they need him to play with boost, with tempo, with pace. Playing him off the bench gives him more ability to do that, playing fewer minutes, and allows him to be more aggressive because he kind of has to be the guy just based on who they've got out there. It's a bunch of undrafted guys. Shout out to Caleb Martin and a lot of these other guys, by the way, that have still, shown up and played the part and looked aggressive in moments. I thought Martin was great. Strus obviously had really big moments in this game. But Lowry, I mean, it's a situation where so many people credit Butler, and rightfully so, given what he has done and what he did last night. But, I mean, they needed big moments at times during this game. And whether it's a shot from Strus or it's a play from Caleb Martin, looking like a defensive back at half court, or whether it's Caleb Martin finishing a crazy layup, like a Kyrie style layup, Miami just shows up, and it's knowing who they are. It's Spoelstra knowing how to go in these first games, in these game one situations on the road, as they've had to do as an 8 seed and coming out with victories. They've just been so impressive, and no matter how it plays out, like, I think the fans just have to be so proud of that team. And really, Boston can't, not that I think they will, but they can't sleep on this situation, because at a certain point, it's the elephant in the room based on the way that Boston was guarding to start out. I understand Butler is a destroyer of all worlds. At a certain point, after Milwaukee gets knocked out by them, after they have flares and opportunities in the New York series, you just kind of have to trust that Miami, the team that was number one in three-point shooting last year, but wasn't that good this year, that at a certain point that, like, maybe they're making up for lost time of what the regular season was in the postseason, that they're a good enough shooting team. I don't trust the Second Spectrum stats on it, but if you look at them, like we were talking about Strus and how he made the contested three, if you look at the Second Spectrum stats from last night, all 16 of the threes that Miami made, according to Second Spectrum, were with them being either open, meaning they had at least 4 feet of space, or wide open, meaning that they had 6 feet or more of open space to shoot.
Strus definitely hit one that was not wide open.
Exactly. So that's why I'm saying that I know that the Second Spectrum stats were not fully accurate, but when you go back and watch most of these shots, most of them were uncontested. And again, if you're basing the decision not to contest a lot of these threes, and some of them were just mistakes, where Brogdon at the end of the third, just a back-breaking three that they allowed a Strus to end the third. Brutal. He took Zeller on the defensive play, Zeller never shoots threes. And so it leaves Strus wide open to take one at the end of the quarter. He hits it, of course, because he's wide open. But at a certain point, like, you can't say, man, Miami is just, this poor shooting team that the luck has to run out at some point, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to. They were a good
here's the
three-point
thing.
shooting team last year.
Miami for the playoffs is, I'm saying only in quotes, only shooting 37.5% on threes. They're not shooting some crazy outlier like 43% anymore.
Exactly.
They got cold during the Knicks series. That has normalized. This is just good, sound offense. And people make fun. I never have. I'm like a Kool-Aid drinker of it, of Heat culture. #Heat culture. This playoff
I wrote
run,
a book on the Knicks. I can't do that. It's derived from what I wrote my whole book about.
this playoff run should put to bed all the sarcasm about, oh, the media talks up Heat culture like it's a thing. It's a thing. It's not some secret sauce or magic elixir that they have. What it is first, you've got to be tough as hell to play here. We're going to practice with our pads on. We're going to hit people. We're going to put your knee pads on. We're going to hit people. We're going to practice for real. You got to be tough. And that toughness translates to, how many times do we watch these teams? The lights get bright and Milwaukee just collapses. Boston will go through half of every game playing aimless, purposeless basketball. Teams get shook in some of these moments. These guys don't ever. And part of that is the guys they get. Part of that is Jimmy. And they just keep making the right play. If the right play is Jimmy just slowing it down and backing down, that's fine. If the right play is, let's get the machine moving and pass and cut and screen and put Bam over on the sideline for a dribble handoff, we'll just keep running through that. Low turnovers. That's another thing that helped them against Boston. And one of the reasons Boston only got 29 threes up. But and part of the Heat culture is like Riley gets those guys, Spoelstra gets those guys. And part of it also is like, the coach is going to run the show. Like, you're not going to be able to show up to coach. You're not going to be able to loaf your way through things and complain about it. And they set that standard when LeBron, Bosh, and Wade went into Riley's office and implied like, hey, would you blah, blah. And Riley's like, no, that's the coach of the team.
Huge turning point.
Heel. And it's a real thing. And they play these possessions late in the game with a calm intensity, a steady intensity. They don't melt down. They just keep playing. On Boston, my litmus test for this team has become defense. And because I've just come to accept that within the same game, they will have a stretch like they did in 6 minutes of the second quarter where their offense is humming, where they're doing all the right things, hunting Max Strus, running pin downs off Kevin Love's guy to get mismatches. To get mismatches, they can drive and attack the paint and kick out. And then they'll have an 8-minute stretch where Jaylen Brown's like, how about I ISO on Bam with 15 on the shot clock and just let everyone else off the hook? And that's just the way it's going to be. When they play clean defense, they can play a scatter shot offensive game and win almost every game. Last night, I thought they played a C+ defensive game. It wasn't as bad as game one against Philly, where they just like were not present. I thought they overhelped on a lot of situations and gave up threes. And to me, like there was a couple where Jimmy Butler was going one-on-one against Robert Williams, and I think Smart was another one where he's picked up his dribble 13, 14 feet from the rim with 4 on the shot clock. He's going to take a fadeaway jumper. And all of a sudden, this late double team comes from the corner and a 3-point shooter's wide open. The biggest one was Caleb Martin's 3 with 2 minutes left to put him up 7 when they swarmed Jimmy Butler. I think you just got to let Jimmy Butler take a fadeaway and not give Caleb Martin a catch and shoot 3. Caleb Martin, by the way, shooting 39% on threes and 71% on twos in the playoffs.
Fantastic.
There were 2 or 3 where Robert Williams was guarding Bam, and I realized Bam is giving him problems and can make those shots. Same thing, like you got to make him make a 14-foot jump hook, I think, over and over again before you start late doubling. And the same thing happened against the Bucks last year in game 1 of their series, where they were swarming Giannis on when he's taking fadeaways, and they corrected that after game 1. I thought they were a little too exuberant doing that. You mentioned that completely inexcusable Strus 3 to end the third quarter, like a brain fart of epic proportions. Jimmy Butler back cut Brogdon on a totally dead possession late in the shot clock, I think in the first half. There were just too many of like just something between a mistake and a total breakdown where they just weren't clean. When they play clean defense for 46 of 48 minutes, they win. I thought, and Miami, that's not to take anything away from Miami. You give them an opening and they freaking bulldoze through it and take advantage of it.
They gave him a lot of openings. I mean, just between Tatum and Brown, I think, what was it, 10 turnovers that they had? That was as many as Miami basically had as a team. Miami can't make too many mistakes in this series and expect to be all that competitive because of the talent gap that I think is relatively evident. But they know that. They're probably going to go in saying we can't do that. Boston was the team last year that had a grasp on the finals until they started turning the ball over too much. Tatum, has anybody had more swings and ups and downs than Tatum, just like the last 3 or 4 games between the game 6 and the way it started versus the way it ended, the game 7. And then at the end of game 1 here, just essentially three turnovers in a row, pretty bad ones where bad. Again, as you said, where he looks shook. And it's like, if anybody's you're going to theorize someone, build them in a lab and say, like, this person will not be or look shook at any point. I'm going to go with the guy that has 51 points in a game 7, the guy that comes through and hits 3-4 huge shots. I mean, literally season-saving shots for you at the end of a game 6 where he started 1 for 13 or 1 for 14 or whatever it was. He just looked completely spooked, where he's picking up the ball at weird times. He's throwing the ball away. He's traveling at home to start a series. So again, it's not the end of the world, but it's just, it's a situation much like when we saw game 1 in the last series for them, where it's like, they should be able to win this sort of game. They're battle tested enough. They've got the guys. They came out and at one point looked like they were prepared to throw a knockout punch in the second quarter. That's what is so fascinating but scary about this Boston team. But again, when it comes to Miami, knowing who they are, knowing exactly what they are, Spoelstra knowing this situation, this scenario, versus Joe Mazzulla maybe not knowing it as a first-time head coach. Miami was in 54 games in the clutch during the regular season. The only team 54. Keep in mind they only play 82.
Right. It's Heat Pistons without Cade Cunningham coming down to the wire here.
It's just a lot to think about, but it's like you feel like there are a lot of times in these games you play that many games in the clutch, and you've got a guy like Butler, who, by the way, was in that Clutch Player of the Year award. I understood why it went to Fox. I voted for him, but Butler was second on my ballot for a reason. Is that you play at this tempo, at this pace, with this many close games, you know how to handle those situations. You would think Boston does too, just given how many times they've been at this stage. But Miami looked the part.
I was just about to say about Jimmy Butler, who makes these declarations like, I'm the best player in the world. I'm going to lead us. Everyone's doubting us. And I once said about Brett Brown that his voice and his enthusiasm, if he told me today, like, gather a bunch of guys here, I'm like, we're going to rob a bank. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to rob a bank. We're going to drop all our lives. We're going to rob a bank. I'm like, yes, let's do it. Brett Brown has a plan. I'm beginning to think that way about Jimmy Butler. If Jimmy Butler was like, all right, let's get together. We're going to rob a bank. I got the blueprint. I'd be like, you know what? I think we're going to pull off this heist scot-free. Let's do it. And that reminded me of the other big story from this conference finals, which I somehow missed. Did you see anything about Joe Mazzulla's obsession with the town?
I saw it and I put it in my bookmarks to read later. I haven't read it yet.
He watches it 4 times a week, which seems that seems like I like the town. I'm a sucker for any heist movie The nun car chase through the streets of Boston is an all-timer. The plan to rob Fenway Park, I didn't really get. Seemed like a bad idea from the get-go. If he's watching The Town, Joe Mazzulla has like children. If he's watching The Town 4 times a week, I think I'm legitimately alarmed by that. That's alarm. I don't think I would watch anything 4 times a week. And I love heist movies. It's alarming to me.
I mean, I love Breaking Bad. I've got movies that I watch sometimes that I've even watched. I've got heist movies that I've watched that I put on in the background, and I almost use it as almost like a sort of hourglass. There's a Stanley Kubrick movie called The Killing, which for anyone that hasn't seen it, I think it came out in like 1956. It's black and white, but it's wonderful. But it's like exactly an hour and a half long. And so I've watched it so many times to where I know what happens. I don't have to actually actively be watching it to keep up with it. But I can imagine there are a lot of people who are like, yo, it's great and everything that you watch The Town and that you love it that much. Cool. It's got the Boston connection. Cool. Are you going to call a timeout next time we get just mollywopped in a third quarter? I imagine there are a lot of people. You don't get to call a
timeout in the middle of a bank robbery, Chris. There's no timeouts. You can't tell the police, timeout. Our car just lost 2 doors and has no windshield.
Maybe in the director's cut there is something, I don't know, an alternative. But I was a little miffed by the idea of like, what was it, 46-25 in the third, with just it was a disastrous third quarter, in part because of what we both mentioned. The way it ended just kind of hit even harder, and then really gave Miami even more momentum going into that fourth.
I mean, I like The Town.
I'll be honest too in saying I'm actually a decently big movie person, but I've never seen The Town. I've seen Mystic River, and I've told myself, man, it's gonna be a minute before I watch that one again. It's a
Mystic
fantastic
River
movie.
Seems too depressing for me. I'm out.
So The Town is not like that.
I mean, look, it's a heist movie.
Because I feel like a lot of Boston movies are like very, very dark in some way.
A heist movie is just is a little more. There were nun masks in one of the robberies. I mean, like if you saw a car, if I saw a car of bank robbers wearing nun masks driving by me, I would be like, is it too late for me to get in on this?
Part of the reason I bookmarked the story about which by the way is like a really fun story to read, like on the eve of a conference final starting, because you're reading so much X's and O stuff, or at least I am. Part of the reason I bookmarked it and didn't read it is because I haven't seen it. I was like, this is a good opportunity to watch it when I get a minute, since I haven't already. But I feel like I've seen a lot of Boston movies. Was it The Departed? And there's a bunch of them at this point. So I feel like I've seen a lot, but I have not watched The Town yet.
The Town is a B. I would give it a B+. It's entertaining all the way through. It's not a top 5 heist movie for me. I'd have to sit down and think about what my
watch The Killing. It'll be a top 5 for you. I think it is so
it's a heist movie
as far as Kubrick movies. It's a heist movie at a horse race track. It is from 1956.
I'm in. That's it. I'm in.
And here's the other thing. It's non-linear. How many non-linear movies were there in 1956? Like, it goes back and forth in time. It is so cool. Everybody on this podcast, go watch The Killing when you get a chance.
Let me give you a window into my sad suburban dad life. There's a few of us dads in the neighborhood who want to start a heist movie of the month club and like go through all the classic heist movies that either one of us or some of us haven't seen. Also, there's a carnival at our children's school every May. And last year,
has it happened yet?
It happened last year, and we all the parents volunteer and like work carnival stands. And you better believe, by the way, that I'm taunting the children who fail at my game. That's like, I'm just like, it's my favorite thing to do. And we went to one of the dad's houses, had some drinks last year after the Friday night of the carnival. And we began plotting, like, if all of our lives don't work out in the next couple of years, could our starter heist be the carnival? Because we feel like we're on the inside already. And how would we do it?
How are you announcing this on a podcast with the following that you have? I guess it's not going to happen now.
Or is it? Okay. Let me ask you one big question from this game.
Sure.
How in the world did Miami limit the Celtics to 29 3-point attempts? Because the Celtics shoot a ton of threes, and Miami's defense, often by design, though not so much in this game, gives up a ton of threes. How did they do this? What did you see?
I mean, so they come up on you, and this is part of what was surprising about it. They'll come up on you, particularly when it's Tatum and Brown. They play further up when they realize it's like an all-star, all-NBA level ball handler. But I think what the big thing is that for a while, Boston was seeing, rightfully so, oh, the basket is clear to some extent. They were going right at the basket, whether it was Marcus Smart, whether it's Smart throwing 2 or 3 lobs to Rob Williams like he did. And so that was a healthy form of offense for them. Again, I think the question is, why did Boston get away from it at a certain point of really attacking? And I think a lot of it was the turnovers. A lot of it was difficult shots, some of which they made that were kind of more in the mid-range. And some of it, and we've said this before sometimes, we have gotten to a lot of the end of the games where we look up and Jaylen Brown hasn't taken a shot in X amount of time. And last night, it was actually the opposite, where he got plenty of shots towards the end of the game. Some of them were tough shots. He turned the ball over a decent amount of times as well. But sometimes when it feels like almost at the end of the game where Tatum all of a sudden was trying to make something happen, you're going to kind of have a little bit more tunnel vision in those moments. And you're not going to see guys that might be open, may not be open, but you're not moving the ball around because, as I mentioned, Tatum didn't have any field goal attempts in the fourth quarter. All of a sudden, it looked like he was trying to make up for the fact that he didn't, and that's where you saw the travels and all the other mistakes and mental mistakes come in. So some of it, I think, is self-inflicted by Boston. Some of it is Miami recovering very well, too, at times to make sure that, they don't want to give up those shots, and they're making a point to not give them up. They're going to surrender the rim to make sure that they don't give them up because they realize that's one of the ways that they can get beat.
I think Bam switching, his switchability is a big deal because if you form a shell, then it's harder to get to the rim.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the Heat found something in this game and it's not just this game, the Vincent, Lowry, Butler, Martin, Bam. There's no obvious glaring defensive weak spot in that group. You want to say that Vincent and Lowry are huntable, but Lowry is a fire hydrant. You can't move him. And Vincent's tough as hell and moves his feet well. In the lineup, the guy they kept hunting was Strus and or Love. Neither guy's on the floor. That group is plus 10 and 16 minutes for the playoffs. Part of it is that when the Heat do help, when they show help, like one of those Tatum turnovers, I think it was the pass he threw away. They're loading toward him, but they're on their toes and they're kind of shifting one way or another. They make you indecisive. They don't give you an obvious decision. They make your decision making difficult. He's not open. The driving lane's not open, and that's a credit. That's a credit to them as well. The turnovers was part of it. And the other thing I'm paying attention to is, I said from even before the series that I thought the Sixers-Celtics series was a Rob Williams, Al Horford series. Rob Williams on PJ Tucker, Horford on Embiid.
Yeah.
I said that before the series. It took them a long time to get there, but they got there. This series is a trickier one for that group because you've got to start Al on Kevin Love and Robert Williams on Bam, which is fine, but he loses the rover ability because of the way they move Bam around the floor and use him as a facilitator. And that Horford and Rob were minus 10 in 18 minutes. The Celtics were minus 10 in 18 minutes, those two on the floor. And their best stretch of offense was that second quarter that we've referenced, where Horford was the only big guy on the floor, and they just open up the entire floor and drive and attack the rim, and there's no rim protection there because they're all spaced around the three-point arc. Their offense has looked really good in that alignment, and I'm not saying they should not start Robert Williams. I think that'd be a dramatic repivot this early in the series, but that minutes distribution is going to be really interesting to watch. How many minutes do you give the double big group? Is this the series for that? Do you try to line up the minutes? with Caleb Martin, but he's shooting. There's no PJ Tucker on this team who's just a standstill shooter. Nobody is just standing still. Everyone's moving around.
That was we had to do a roundtable of sorts at Sports Illustrated, and we were asked in the roundtable, like, what's the matchup you're watching in this series? And that was what I mentioned, is that I think, as you said, there's not an obvious person to just kind of plug Robert Williams on here. And I think that's kind of the point of what Miami is doing, is that Kevin Love, for as wonderful as he is, and the impact that he makes, by the way, he had a couple of big shots last night, but also had the, his trademark outlet pass and everything that they were beating them in transition with. Robert Williams doesn't have a natural guy that he can guard, because even Kevin Love is only on the floor for 15 minutes a night. He's starting, but they're really using Lowry kind of in effect as a starter in terms of the minutes he plays, when he's playing, when he's on the floor. And so where do you utilize him, particularly as we said, Miami is much bigger than their regular season 3-point percentage number would suggest. They're much better than that. And they're showing it in the playoffs. You can't rely on the idea that, like, oh, their shooting will come back down to earth. Milwaukee probably thought the same thing. So it's a huge series from that standpoint. Also, Robert Williams had some really great moments in the game yesterday. I mean, he had a couple of big offensive rebounds and putbacks.
14 and 7. Offensively, I thought he had a good game.
He had a very good game. I mean, he had a couple of the lobs that Marcus Smart was finding him with, where he was along the back line, just kind of creeping along the back line. He also is, if we're going to talk about the mistake that Brogdon made, the save that Robert Williams had to Kevin Love was just brutal. And it felt like that was maybe not a turning point moment, but just like in a third quarter where stuff was starting to go wrong, that just felt like, oh, we got to stop here. And then to save it there was just we talk about brain farts. We can't excuse that one necessarily.
Bam is also really good at when a Heat ball handler is kind of just, slowly burrowing his way in on the pick and roll. Jimmy likes to go like almost all the way under the rim.
He hides right there.
He's really good at just little loop cuts around and changing places. And Rob has had trouble in game one. He lost them a couple of times. At one point, he rotated to a place that Bam was before and no longer was, and Bam was over here for a floater. That's really that's an area they got to clean up too. Look, I will not say who this is to spare them the indignity, but in Chicago yesterday, someone asked me, "Hey, where are you going to next?" And I said, "I think I'm going to go up to Boston for Game 5." And this person snickered, "If necessary." And I said, "Oh, I think it's going to be necessary. I think it's going to be necessary." And now it's very necessary. And the Heat just keep doing this. Chris Herring, Sports Illustrated, writing a ton, podcasting a ton. Anything you'd like to promote other than your best-selling book, Blood in the Garden, which was extra relevant last round between the Heat and the Knicks?
It was. Well, thank you for having me as always. I'll have something bigger coming this coming week. So not this week, but next week, and I'll get back to work on book number 2, which I can't say exactly what it is. I think I've talked to you about it, but I'll get back to work with that when I can, when time allows for it. But I've got big stuff on the way, hopefully.
Well, I've got to go because one of my buddies has turned his garage into a full-scale model of the Carnival money storage. So we're doing a rehearsal heist in a couple hours. I'll prepare for that.
We covered law and crime, man. Don't get caught up. You have a good thing going. I don't know. We don't want to have to give the John Morant speeches to you from the standpoint of
Chris Herring. Enough. Chris Herring. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, buddy. Thanks for having me.